All right, so this morning we want to welcome back our good friend Rabbi David Zaslow. The name of his talk today is, of course, What's in a Name and How Do We Name God? This is going to be really interesting. I look forward to hearing this. So, welcome back. Of course, Dave, Rabbi is no stranger to our community, so a hearty welcome to you as well. So, Rabbi David moved to Oregon in 1970, where he completed his master's degree with a focus on creative writing and education. He was ordained in 1995 by Reverend Zalman, and I'm not even trying that last name, in the Jewish Renewal Movement, and he's been the spiritual leader of the synagogue since that time, that particular synagogue. He's the author of Jesus First Century Rabbi, which was awarded the Church Synagogue Library Association Book of the Year. That's just a little bit about our speaker today. So, with that being said, Rabbi David, again, we welcome you here and look forward to the inspirational words that you will be sharing with us on this very important topic. So, thank you, and the floor is now yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Dan. What an honor to be here once again. This is one of my spiritual homes with you now. I really love coming here. I will just amend the bio is that I retired last July,
Oh, wow.
and so I'm what they call Rabbi Emeritus. I'm out to pasture, and we have another rabbi who's taken over the synagogue. And like I said before, Ayala, our executive director, moved to Israel. So we have a wonderful transition from one generation to the next in our community. So you're right, Dan. It is a fascinating topic, how we name God, especially in context of learning. When you study an ancient language, you realize that the grammar, the context, the syntax of words are very different than our contemporary languages. So when you're studying the Bible in Hebrew, you're studying a grammar that's, well, the older parts of the Bible are more than 3,000 years old, and the newer parts are about 2,300 years old. And you can see a difference already in the way grammar was being used. I'll give you an example, and Ayla, you could jump in if you want to give me, if you think of any examples here. But in modern English, let's say we have past tense, present tense, and future tense, right? In our verbs, something happened, something's happening, something's going to happen. In Hebrew, just like many other actual very ancient languages, you only have two tenses. You have action completed and action incomplete. So if an action is not completed, it's not done. So, for example, when you're reading the Bible in Hebrew, you have a sense that some of these ancestors and what they're doing, they're still doing it, right? It's incomplete action. For example, the creation of the world is not something that happened then, it's happening all the time. The revelation of the Torah on Mount Sinai didn't happen then, it's still happening. So when you have what's called this perfect, imperfect tense, only two tenses, you could say it's more primitive, but in a way it's really profound because it's ambiguous. You have this sense of life, of activities, of revelations continuing on, rather than saying, I'll give you a quick example. The King James Bible translates the beginning of the Bible saying, "In the beginning, God created." And in the beginning, that word "the," so that is the beginning, meaning it's only one beginning. And created means it was in the past tense. Where in the Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created, has a whole different sense. It's more like a better translation would be when God began creating. So it's not like the creation is over. And it also leaves room to the imagination that by not having the definite article the in the beginning, saying when God began creating, that there were more than one beginnings. And so this leaves this open space, white space we call it, which leaves room for the imagination to say, I wonder if there were several different beginnings. And God was just like practicing, getting all the clay together, and he puts together a pot and said, nah, this one's not working, throws it away. And so we have something called a midrash, or the storytelling tradition that arises out of ambiguity. So ambiguity, rather than being bad from a Hebrew point of view, is really cool because it leaves room for the imagination. And Ayla, I know you when you moved back to Israel, you're already speaking Hebrew, but have you noticed any differences when you're studying the Bible, being an Israeli there, in terms of any of the grammar or the language that we've been studying together?
No, not really, but modern Hebrew is not really the same as biblical Hebrew because we've had to adapt to our modern world, right? So there is a past, present, and future tense in modern spoken Hebrew today in Israel.
Right. Ayla, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I heard that in Israel they've actually done, listen to this, it's crazy, a translation of the Bible from biblical Hebrew to modern Hebrew.
I've
There's a-
heard about that, but I have not seen it.
Yeah, take a look for it. I really am curious what you think about it because isn't that wild? It's the same Hebrew, except for these little subtle differences, such as the tenses of past, present, and future. I'm really curious how they translate certain things. Well, let me get started here. I've only got 30 minutes and I want to get started. I got some exciting stuff to share with you. And I'm going to do it in the form of a slideshow. Not going to do questions right away. We'll finish my 30 minutes, and then you're going to, at the coffee break, I'll hang around and you can ask questions. So, what's in a name? Naming the unnameable. In Hebrew, we have many, many names for God. And it just so happens that yesterday, all around the world, Jewish people were studying the Torah, and in the book of Exodus, this is what was revealed. And as I said, whether it's in Israel or France or Canada or Latin America or the United States, Jewish people were studying these very verses from Exodus. God says to Moses, I am. You see that those Hebrew letters there? They're four letters, and they are the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey. It doesn't really matter if you don't know the Hebrew. It's an unusual name. Verse 3, I appeared to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob as El Shaddai, but I did not make myself known to them by my name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And verse 4, I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. I've heard the moanings of the Israelites because of the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I've remembered my covenant. So, of course, we're in the middle of the story of the liberation of the slaves in Egypt by God using Moses and his sister Miriam and his brother Aaron to help. But the most important thing that I want to share with you is this verse 3, which is, I did not make myself known to them by my name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now, it's interesting is that in English, the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is translated as Lord. It it's a very poor translation. Nothing could be further. This particular word is really, really interesting because it's not a masculine it's not a patriarchal masculine name. Yud-Heh-Vav, it's actually more of a verb. It's more something close to being, B-E-I-N-G, right? So listen to this. This is the Midrash. So the verse comes, I give you a new name that I used to be known by. So people say, well, what do you mean different names? So the Midrash, remember, this is Jewish imagination, 2,000 years old, written down. And here's what it says. God says to Moses, you want to know my name? I am called by my deeds. I might be called El Shaddai or Tzivaot or Elohim or Havaya. When I judge my creatures, I am called Elohim. When I'm at war with evil, I'm called Tzivaot. When I tolerate the sins of humanity, I'm called El Shaddai. When I have compassion on my world, I am called this very name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, or YHWH. Hannah was the first to know me as Tzivaot. Hagar was the first to know me as El Roi. Abraham knew me as El Shaddai. So already we have this sense of the different names of God. And let's see how this plays out practically. And it seems like my computer is stuck here for some reason. Here we go. Okay. Now this name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, that's translated as Lord, I wonder what would be a good way to explain it to you. Would be the idea of understanding it as four different letters. In English, scholars call it the Tetragrammaton. Tetra meaning four, gramma meaning letters, the Tetragrammaton. In Judaism, we do not pronounce it as a spiritual practice to preserve the sense that G-D, God, is beyond any limitation. After all names are limits. And you'll see this in Jewish context. Very often, we don't write the name of God. We'll write G-D, or Lord, we'll write L-O-R-D. Why? It seems kind of foolish, but it's actually a spiritual practice to say, listen, once you name something, you're limiting it. So if I'm David and you're Dan and you're Ayala, we're different people, and our names are limitations. But God is unlimited. And so we have this name of God, this Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Tetragrammaton, that's an unlimited name of God. The four-letter name, the second paragraph here, therefore becomes a fractal of the unified forces in nature, earth, water, air, and fire. A fractal of the kingdoms, mineral, plant, animal, and human, and a fractal of each of us. And each of us has a body, a heart, a mind, and a soul. Now, throughout history, when people wanted to understand the nature of the divine, there was an evolution in theologos. Evolution doesn't mean it's better. It's just a different, more, it's like an operating system on your computer. It gets more complex and more advanced and hopefully better and better. So in the ancient world, pre-writing, pre-reading, there was this idea of animism. Everything was alive. The trees, the hills were alive with the sound of music, the sky, the clouds, everything was alive. And that's called animism. And then wisely, people started saying, wow, all these different life forces in nature really fall into the categories of earth, water, and fire. And they developed the idea of the mythos, the mythologies of many gods and goddesses. And then comes the idea of pantheism, which is that God is everything. It's also parallel to the idea of panentheism, which is God is within everything. And then monotheism, there's only one God. And then finally, the one we seem to be moving towards today is called monism. God and creation, time and space, matter and energy are inseparably one. Now, these are downward compatible. In other words, just because we may be monotheistic, it doesn't mean we're not also pantheistic or panentheistic. We see God in everything, just like in your mission statement. Seeing the divine in each other is so important not to forget what an important part of theology that is. My teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, I know Dan didn't want to pronounce his name, but Rabbi Zalman used to say, God did not just create the world. Listen to this. God became the world. Imagine walking out in nature, and instead of just seeing a tree or the hill or the grass or the ocean, seeing that God is in everything you see, in every wave, in every breeze. God didn't create the world. God became the world. Now, when we say our blessings, we use two names for God prominently. Now, there's many names for God, but we use the name Adonai, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now, I'm calling it Adonai, but that's a replacement name. It doesn't say Adonai. The letters are Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and then there's the name Elohim. And it's translated in English as Lord God. But in Hebrew, the Elohim and the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh are two unique aspects of God. So on the bottom, you see the YHVH, YHWH, which is translated as Lord, is the Tetragrammaton, and it relates to God in process, that everything is becoming and changing and shifting. And the Eloheinu, which means our God, is the God that we see inside the natural world. Lord God is not really show you very much distinction between them as you find in the Hebrew. Now, pantheism is fascinating because people think it's like lots of gods. But it's not so much lots of gods as God is in everything there is. Famous pantheist in the world was Spinoza, a great Jewish philosopher, Einstein, Walt Whitman, D.H. Lawrence, Carl Sagan, Alan Watts, Goethe, Thoreau, Lao Tzu, Nietzsche, Carl Jung, Beethoven, Emerson, Tolstoy, Nietzsche, and maybe some of you. Pantheism is a beautiful way to see the world, that God is everything, in everything. Now, our understanding of divinity, of God, comes from in the early part of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, we see that Jacob awakes from his dream and he says, surely Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, this word translated as Lord, is present in this place and I knew it not. Shaken or afraid, he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. How beautiful that is. He wakes up and he says, God was in this place and I didn't even know it. How often is that true in our lives? That we're in an experience, we're in a place, wherever it is, a scary place, a wonderful place, and you open your eyes. In other words, you wake up and say, wow, God is present in this place and I didn't even know it. And then you say, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the abode of God. This is none other than the house, the Beit Elohim, the house of God, and it's the gateway to heaven. And so, of course, that's true of any place where we are at. Hopefully, it's true for all of us this morning, but we may not be aware of it. We may think, well, I'm in this wonderful group of people. I'm learning. I didn't realize this was the place of God, that this was the gateway to heaven. But in the Jewish way of seeing the world, this is an opportunity right now, at this moment, to see yourselves as being in the gateway to heaven. Now, to get to that, you'll see in a later story, Jacob wrestles with an angel. But those passages in the book of Genesis are really ambiguous. Is it an angel? Or is it a man? Or is it God? Or what is it? And I'm saying that because when you read these paragraphs, all these words, angel, man, and God, are all used in the same few sentences to indicate an ambiguity, an uncertainty. So sometimes when we struggle in our own lives, we have to say, who am I struggling with? Is it like in Chagall's painting over to the right? Am I struggling with an angel? Or am I struggling with people around me in my life? Am I struggling with God? Or am I struggling with something inside myself? So, the last biblical passage will be this one from Exodus from a couple of weeks ago that the Jewish world studied, where Moses says to God, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, in other words, to be liberated from slavery, he's going to go to Pharaoh. Who shall I say sent me? And the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they're going to ask me, what's his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, this is a great, great three words. Ehiyeh, Asher Ehiyeh. Continuing, thus shall you say to the Israelites, Ehiyeh sent me to you. Now, if you know the Hebrew, Ehiyeh is not exactly a name. Ehiyeh, Asher Ehiyeh is often translated as I am what I am, but it's also because it's got that letter Aleph in the front, also indicates a future tense. In other words, I will be what I will be. It's almost like God is saying to Moses, don't give him a name. Don't tell him my name is Harold or Dan or Lucy. Tell him Ehiyeh sent me. The name of becoming, the name of being. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild when you look at the Hebrew. Ehiyeh Asher Ehiyeh is not a name. It's a process. So when you're studying the Bible in Hebrew, you get the idea that God is process, not product. God is verb, not noun. So I'd like us to take a few minutes now, and we're going to do a little meditation. And as you did before, just settle yourself in for just a moment and take a nice clearing breath. And I'll teach you this beautiful meditation. It comes from the city of Sfat in Israel in the 16th century. And one of our great teachers, Isaac Luria, had this idea that when we are breathing, we are actually saying God's name, that God's name is the sound of our breath. Now, I can't really demonstrate it to you while I'm leading the meditation, but I'll just give you an example. If you think that when you're breathing in and breathing out, you can almost hear, if you go slow enough, God's name spoken in your breath. like this. That's God's name, or one of God's names. God is the breathing sound of life itself. God is the breathing sound of the pulsation of opposites. God is the breathing sound of our breath when we're sad, when we're joyous, when we're lonely, when we're satisfied with who we are. God is the pulsation of breath when we're sleepy, when we're awake, when we're ill, when we're healed. God is in every moment of our lives as the breath of life. So here's the meditation. And again, it's hard for me to be speaking and guiding it while I'm doing it, but I'll share it to you first for a moment, and then we'll do it. When your breath is all the way out, envision that top letter, that Y, from the top of your head. And then you inhale. And that inhale is that upper letter H there. The top of the breath is the W, and that's the top of the breath. And then the exhale is the breath coming out, is that lower hey, that letter. And the reason I'm showing it to you like this before we start the meditation is to show you that God is implanted, so to speak, within every one of us. The image of God, we're created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And so these great Kabbalists, these great mystics in Sfat taught us that imagine God inside of you, the letters of God's name, so to speak, not literal letters, but the energy of each letter of the Y, the H, the W, the H being implanted inside of you and being part of your breath. In fact, just parenthetically, this is where the Jehovah's Witnesses got their name Jehovah from. It's actually not accurate in the Hebrew because we don't have a J sound in Hebrew, but that Jehovah, Yehovah, is close, so to speak, to the way this unpronounceable name is actually written. So let's do this as a meditation. Okay, clearing breath, feet on the ground, just settle in and relax. Breathe all the way out. Still. Take an inhale. The breath is all the way out the top. Exhale. Let your air out. And it starts again. The breath is all the way out. That's the Yud. You inhale. That's the Hey of God's name, the H. The breath is all the way in. That's the W of God's name. And then you exhale. That's the lower Hey of God's name. So I'm going to be quiet now for a moment. And on your own, just breathe in and breathe out. And envision the top of your breath and the bottom of the breath of being also two letters. Even though there's no motion, it's a transition between inhale and exhale, contraction and expansion. Feel all four of these as representations energetically of God's name inside of you. Just take a minute. I want to bless every one of you and every one of us, all of us, together this morning to sense, like your beautiful mission statement says, that the divine is inside of every one of us. And whether it's through the breath of these Hebrew letters, or whether it's some aspect in your own life of your joy and sadness, that God is with you, the divine is within you, the divine is always present within you. And I also want to bless you to realize that it's not just you, but that God is in all of your neighbors, all of your friends in your community. And I also want to bless you that God is not just within you and your family and your community, but God is in the natural world. I want you to envision that this four-letter name of God, the YHWH, are the fractal of everything in nature, that God is present in the leaves, in the animals, in the sky, and in the mountains. And we take a clearing breath. And we rejoin our group and learn a little bit more. The names of God in Hebrew can be spatial or temporal, in time or space. They can be feminine, as in the name Shekhinah, or masculine, as in the name Adonai. And they can be earthly, which is like Avinu, which means our father, or they can be heavenly, the name we just studied today a little, the Yud He Vav He. They can be material, Rachaman, which means compassionate one. Or it can be a spiritual name, like El, one of the ancient names. It could be a contraction, Elohim, God in nature. Or it can be expansion, expansive, the name Yah. It could be concrete, like we say in Adon Olam, that God of the world. Or it could be an abstract name, like the name Hashem, which just means the name. It could be a noun, melech, or it could be a verb, YHVH. Now, I'd love us to read this together. So make sure, if you could make sure your sound is on mutes. Though I wish we could do it together and it wouldn't be too cacophonous, but Zoom is not quite there yet. This is a beautiful poem that we're going to finish with now by one of my friends, may he rest in peace, Rabbi Arthur Waskow. You whose very name is the breath of life. The breathing of all life gives joy and blessing to your name. As lovers lie within each other's arms, whispering each other's name into the other's ear. So we lie in your arms, breathing with each breath your name, your truth, your unity. You alone, your breath of life alone, guides us, frees us, transforms us, heals us, nurtures us, teaches us. First, last, future, past, inward, outward, beyond, between. You are the breathing that gives life to all the worlds. And we do the breathing that gives life to all the worlds. As we breathe out what the trees breathe in and the trees breathe out what we breathe in, so we breathe each other into life. We and you. So we breathe each other into life. We and you. So we breathe each other into life. We and you. My sense is, my friends, that if we were to see the divine within each other, God within each other, we would treat each other a little bit differently. We would treat each other with a little bit more care, a little bit more respect. Instead, rather than seeing God within each other, we see an adversary or a challenge within each other. And so I bless us all to do what your community seems to do very naturally, as Susan, when she was leading her beautiful prayer, to see the divine in each other, and not just each other, but in the natural world as well, in nature as well. So we'll just take a few minute pause here, and we'll have questions and answers. Is this right, Dan? Should we do questions now, or should we?
It'll be during coffee talk.
It'll be during coffee talk. Okay, so I'm going to hang around, and that's the formal part of my talk. But hang around, Ayala, and hang around Leah Avital if you'd like. I'm so glad you got to meet my little New Thought community here, and they got to meet you. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you during coffee talk. I got to fill my cup.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi David. That was truly thought-provoking. I, yeah, so much to think about there. So, and I'm sure each and every one of us certainly will have questions for you during the coffee talk. So, thank you again for sharing that message about all of the various names. I've never quite heard it put that way before. So, it was definitely something new for me to hear that. So, we appreciate the time that you took and for the knowledge that you shared with us today. Greatly appreciated.